What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I filled a small dish with beer and planted it in my raised bed. Okay, not really. This is a slug trap. Slugs enjoy the taste of beer, a little too much. Let's see if we catch any. These basil seedlings just sprouted, and so have all of these radishes. I harvested some Swiss chard to make a salad to go with grilled salmon. I had never eaten chard before and I was impressed with the flavor. I chopped up the stems and added them to the salad, which added a very nice crunch. I'm gonna be eating good all summer. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? The garden became covered in little cotton balls, all thanks to this big cottonwood. But I won't let that distract me because so many plants have just sprouted. Some highlights are the flowers I planted in between my squash plants. And of course the cantaloupe have shot up to greet me. Looks like these cucumbers are doing alright as well. The spaghetti squashes sent out tendrils. I'm hoping these eventually attach themselves to the trellis. A couple male flowers on my zucchini plants have opened up. I'm hoping this is a good sign for where the season is headed. I'm able to grow lettuce and strawberries indoors year-round thanks to the power of hydroponics. This affordable hydroponics kit has been feeding me and my family lettuce since January. I recently transplanted some strawberries in here as well. The kit has adjustable light settings for vegetables, fruits, and herbs, although I think the only difference between the settings is how long the light stays on. As long as the plants are getting white light, they'll be just fine. You do have to refill the tank every once in a while, but far less often than you'd be watering a raised bed. No advertisement, no sponsorship, not even an affiliate link, I just really like this thing. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? The shade cloth I put up in the greenhouse seems to be helping. My eggplant has a fruit growing. I need to get these outside quickly. And these strawberries are doing just fine. My pepper plants are starting to form their first peppers. I'm appreciative of everybody in the comments letting me know the little stick coming out of the peppers is the stamen. Completely normal. These peppers are looking so good and healthy. Sometimes hard work does pay off. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I returned home from a weekend trip to find my garden covered in cottonwood seed. And when I say covered, I mean completely covered. It looks like the leaf blower will have to make an appearance. Even my light beer slug trap is filled with cotton. I didn't catch any slugs though. While I was gone, a few nasturtiums sprouted, plus these soybeans. I need to get a trellis up stat. I thinned my radishes and noticed something's been taking small bites out of them. I'm considering the culprit to be ants, but I'm not really sure. Could be aphids as well. I gathered the leftover radish plus some kitchen scraps and threw them in my compost bin. The eggplant in the greenhouse isn't looking too hot, so I gave it some fertilizer. My snap peas flowered over the weekend as well. I was initially worried, but one of the best tools for beginning gardeners is always a quick Google search. Apparently I'll have tasty peas ready to eat in 5 to 8 days. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I attempted to manually pollinate my squash plants. The goal is to transfer pollen from the male flower to the female flower on the actual zucchini, but a lot of the female flowers haven't opened up. I'll have to be a little more patient. I added this trellis for my soybeans and started picking weeds out of my raised beds. The cottonwood seeds have already started wreaking havoc. It'll be a tall task to keep these out of the garden. Then I checked on my peppers and it definitely raised my spirits back up. And is that possibly the start of a snap pea? This raised bed is a little overgrown, so I decided to harvest some Swiss chard. These leaves have gotten massive. It's a good thing they taste delicious. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I drilled holes into the bottoms of these buckets so they have proper drainage when I transplant my eggplants and tomatoes. I put a trash bag underneath the bucket to collect all of the scrap plastic. I don't need it blending in with all of the cottonwood seeds. Then I filled the bucket with my homemade potting mix consisting of 1 part peat moss, 1 part compost, and a handful of vermiculite. Since I just gave my eggplants fertilizer, I'm gonna skip that step for now, but I'll add some granular fertilizer in later. I detangled some of the roots and placed the eggplant in the bucket. Then I added more potting mix to reach the top of the soil of the transplanted eggplant. But I made one big mistake. I overestimated the amount of potting mix I had left from my peppers. I'll have to get more compost tomorrow. One of the most important lessons I've learned while gardening is that if you're not a naturally patient person, you'll have to become one. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I took a trip to the city dump to pick up compost for my homemade potting mix. I'm lucky to live in a community with a locally sourced and free compost option. I mixed the compost with peat moss and a bit of vermiculite when I returned home. I filled 2 buckets with the potting mix and transplanted my remaining eggplants. I gave the eggplants a drink of water and a light covering of mulch. I guess you can never have too many buckets. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I transplanted the tomato plants that have been patiently waiting in my greenhouse. I filled each bucket halfway full with my homemade potting mix. Then I placed the tomato inside. I trimmed off the lower leaves and continued filling the bucket with potting mix. You can do this with tomatoes because they send out roots basically up the entire stem. Then I mixed some granular fertilizer in the potting mix. Tomatoes, like most of us, need a lot of support. I attached the tomato to this 4-foot bamboo pole using these clips. I watered the tomato in and repeated this 6 more times. I'm only growing Roma tomatoes this year. Last year I grew a wide variety of tomatoes and my wife and I didn't really eat most of them. So this year I'm focused entirely on salsa and pasta sauce. I cleaned up my mess and topped each bucket with a bit of mulch. Hopefully this green lacewing lays some eggs and keeps the aphid population in check. He's like a little tomato bodyguard. Here's everything I'm growing in May in the Nebraska garden. Arugula and spinach that I'm letting go to seed. Broccoli. Yellow and green onions. More broccoli. Lettuce. Swiss chard. Zucchini. More zucchini. A lot more zucchini. Spaghetti squash. Radishes, more Swiss chard and soybeans. Cucumber. Cantaloupe. Loofah. Okra. Sugar snap peas. Eggplant. Peppers. More peppers. Tomatoes. Another loofah. Nasturtiums. Rosemary, lavender, and marigolds. Anise hyssop. Strawberries. More strawberries. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? This eggplant is acting like a total diva. Let's give it some water and see how it looks in a couple hours. I decided to water the whole garden today. I'd like to say Happy Memorial Day, and it sure is one. The perfect weather for a day off from work. I noticed my spaghetti squash needs a little help climbing up the trellis. That should do nicely. I took out a few seedlings that rained down from my cottonwood tree. My broccoli looks like it's so close to harvest. I'm super excited. The strawberries in the greenhouse needed some water too. While I was in the greenhouse, I decided it was time to start some arugula and lettuce seed. I want to have young plants ready to go into the garden once my arugula and spinach give off their seeds. I poured a little too much water into the tray, so I took a short break while it soaked into the soil. I sowed for 12 arugula on the left and 12 lettuce on the right. I bet I'm gonna mix these up at some point. I sprinkled some soil on top of the seeds and put this clear plastic dome on top. This will help keep the moisture in. And this is just a few hours later. I told you the eggplant was a diva. It's time for a veggie check. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? My sugar snap peas finally grew big enough to harvest. I somehow underestimated the amount of peas I would get when I planted 64 seeds back in March, but I'm definitely not complaining. It took me a few attempts to perfect my method for pinching the peas off of the plant. Eventually I realized the key was to pinch right above the pod in the flower, and hold on to just the bottom of the pea with my bottom fingers. While pinching, I gently tugged and the pea came free every time. Time for a taste test. The verdict is better than expected. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? I did my best lumberjack impression and chopped down this tiny broccoli tree. I cut the stem at a 45-degree angle above all of the tiny broccoli side shoots. I'm hoping to harvest many more broccoli heads just like this one. My tripod decided it couldn't handle it anymore and fell down while I cut the second broccoli head. Just look at the color on this thing. What happened today in the Nebraska garden? Another day, another harvest of fresh snap peas, but a different kind of pod started growing in my garden recently. I let these arugula plants go to seed. There are multiple seeds in each of these tiny pods. Once the arugula plants dry out, I'll remove them from the raised bed, and I'll have all the arugula seed I could ever want. I fed my eggplants a bit of organic fertilizer, and then I gave them a nice drink of water. My spaghetti squashes started to climb this trellis. These plants are a lot bigger than they seem at first glance. The zucchini are getting bigger as well. I'm just counting down the hours at this point. Checking out the Nebraska garden at night. Look at the size of these eggplants. And these peppers are getting huge. You gotta love zucchini, especially if you grow as much as I do. I think I may have a problem. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? From now on, every day will be zucchini inspection day. I checked each of my 11 summer squash plants to see if there were any zucchini ready to harvest. A lot of the green zucchini are still quite immature, but some are showing signs that they'll be ready soon. The golden yellow zucchini have always had a head start. I would like this fruit to fill out just a tad bit more before I harvest. But these two zucchini are the perfect size to pick. This is the moment I've been waiting for all spring. I snipped each zucchini off at their stem like this. A beautiful first harvest. What happened today in the Nebraska Garden? My peppers have started changing colors. Although all peppers start out green, I'm expecting red, yellow, and orange peppers this summer. The peppers changing colors tells me they're starting to ripen, something to definitely be excited about. My dill plant has produced flowers. I need to keep a close eye on this because dill spreads like wildfire. The side shoots on my broccoli plants have started growing little heads. And these other broccoli look like they're almost ready to harvest. In the greenhouse, my arugula seeds sprouted, but my lettuce seeds did not. So I separated both plants and gave them each water. Then I put the plastic dome back on top of the lettuce. Let's hope it germinates this time. One of my strawberries has produced a flower. I'm torn because I'd love to eat my first strawberry soon, but I also think the young plant should focus more on its leaves. I'm wondering if I should just prune off the flower. What do you think I should do?